Well, welcome to the Top Gun Show. We've got a very special guest today. Eric Pearson is an experienced merchandising executive in the B2B and B2C arenas. Eric served as a senior category merchant and divisional merchandising director at Office Depot for 6 combined years. Among other industry contributions, he created an insight tool leveraging B2B customer segmentation data to identify over $1 billion in potential sales by customer, by product line. Over the years, he's also become a subject matter expert in developing people. Eric, welcome to the show.
Steve, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. And I can tell you, I learn a lot by watching your show. So I'm really gratified to be a guest today.
That's great, man. I appreciate it. Well, in our prior conversation, you told me you were passionate about AQ, or adaptability quotient. Why don't you describe what that is?
Happy to do it. For me, Steve, it's really the most important skill that an individual or an organization can have in today's marketplace. You know, it's not right now about how much you know, how smart you are. You think your IQ, or even your emotional intelligence. You think about your level of empathy, you're great at team building, self-aware, your EQ. Don't get me wrong, Steve. Those are very important, but they're not the most important. Right now, it is the ability to adapt and thrive in a rapidly changing environment. And that's really how I would define AQ. You know, the term itself was coined back in 2010, really, but it's only become in the vernacular in the last probably 2 years. And for me personally, early 2018 is when I really started to see it and see commentary and research. And as I've seen it and related to me personally, I've really come to believe that it matters. It matters. You must develop it, discover it, and enhance it to really be effective in today's marketplace.
Right. No, that's great. And especially in today's marketplace with what's gone on this year, we have nothing to do but adapt. But why don't you elaborate on why is it so important to an individual or even to an organization to understand their AQ?
You know, my number one answer to that question, Steve, if you don't have AQ, whether it's you individually or your organization, the world is just frankly going to pass you by. If you're waiting to return back to normal, I've got really bad news for you. It's not going to happen. And even though I think, as I say that, we inherently maybe believe that, it's important to know that without AQ, without that ability to adapt, survive, and thrive, we're just not going to make it in the current market environment.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
I had a really, I'd like to tell you about an interesting conversation I had a couple of days ago with a VP at a Fortune 50 organization. I asked him this question. I said, what's keeping you up at night? And I loved his answer. He said, I want to intersect where the customer needs to be. He didn't say where they want to be or where they're going, but where they need to be. And he said, we have great 3-year plans, but even with the speed of transformation, we had to step back, refocus, and then speed up. And we're 100% focused on where the customer needs are shifting. And I love that answer. And I can tell you that individual and that organization, they are adapting and they are thriving.
Yeah, that's great insight. And it's no wonder he's a leader of a Fortune 50 company. And that's pretty incredible stuff.
It really is.
Briefly talk about just to give the viewers insight into like 3 components of AQ.
As I've researched and analyzed, and even in my own personal journey, I think there's 3 really critical components to AQ. I'll start with the first one, learnability. And even though, Steve, I talk about my own journey, I'm going to give you the World Economic Forum definition for learnability. It's that desire and capacity to develop in-demand skills to remain employable in today's marketplace. And I think we'd all want that and need that. And if I was to dig into learnability for just a sec, it's a process that involves learning, unlearning, which is very important, and relearning, and understanding that process is critical. And that leads me to the second component, which is mindset. Without the right mindset, you can't develop. It's very difficult to develop learnability. Carol Dweck, she's a professor out at Stanford, wrote a fantastic book called Mindset that has been very impactful in my own journey. And it's really highlighting the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, and really how to move from a fixed to a growth mindset. And ultimately, the view you adopt for your life really impacts how you live it, and how you grow and how you adapt. And there's two things that you have to change the meaning for in your life. One is the meaning of failure, and one is the meaning of effort. And as I grew to understand those two things, it's profoundly impacted my own journey and has been incredibly helpful to me. The last component is something called working identity. And I include this because we each, Steve, have working identities when you think about our work life. And we have our identity through the history, the background, the experience that we have. And our identity is based on what we do, what we know, how we do what we do. But in order to have high IQ, we have to be able to change our working identity as we progress forward. And that's not something that you can do through introspection. You just can't sit back and think about it and say, hey, I'm going to change. It's actually a process of learning a new skill, learning a new way of doing something. And for most people, change is terrifying. And when you think about change in that process, the common theme is uncomfortable. And so when you adapt, when you change, your working identity actually changes, and you have to kind of hang on through that uncomfortable. You have to really stick with it until you develop that new skill, learn that way of doing something, and that leads you to a new working identity. And so for me, that's been critical in my own journey and understanding. And as I teach the course that I put together, I develop ways to understand and teach people each of these three components. And if I could close on this last working identity, I mentioned a book for mindset. I'll also mention a book for working identity, and it was written by Herminia Ibarra with that title, Working Identity. And these things have been profound in my life. They've helped people that I teach in my course. And I think when you put the three of them together, they are critical to developing AQ, or adaptability quotient.
Well, that's great, man. I'm sure your course is so powerful. I can see CEOs and leaders right now thinking, I got to contact Eric and find out more. Individuals want to find out more. So your phone's going to be ringing off the hook. So that was a great syllabus there. Now, you're a big fan of the Top Gun Show, and I know that there are millions and millions of people watching this right now. So what's the one
I heard
thing?
billions, actually. I thought it was billions.
Yeah. Why don't you share a little known fact about yourself?
A little known fact about myself, nothing beats a good hike for me. There's something about getting out and exploring, and that just helps rejuvenate, refresh, inspire. And my number one favorite place to hike is actually on your side of the country, Yosemite. I love hikes in Yosemite, whether it's up and towards the backcountry, going up to a waterfall. There's nothing that beats a good hike, Steve.
Hey, man. Well, I got to go. My wife's waiting outside in the trailer. We're heading down to Yosemite. So I really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Steve. Really, really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody.